The void of space stretched endlessly, silent and cold, as the massive warship glided between stars, its hull gleaming with a quiet menace. From a distance, it looked almost peaceful, but any world caught in its path knew nothing but devastation. Humanity had built this weapon not just as a means of defense, but as a force of pure dominance. Entire planets once teeming with life now lay in ruin, their skies choked with dust, oceans boiling away, and ecosystems collapsing into permanent silence. No colony, no settlement, no sign of civilization could survive the calculated fury of this machine. Inside the command deck, the crew moved with a precise, almost mechanical efficiency. They were not cruel by nature, but trained for a singular purpose: to execute humanity's will without hesitation. Each decision, each strike was measured and deliberate. There were no second thoughts. They were the tip of a spear humanity had thrust into the galaxy, and the consequences of missing their target were unthinkable. Yet even in this steel and fire vessel, whispers of doubt sometimes floated among the crew, questions about what they were destroying, what it meant for their own future, and whether the universe would ever forgive what they were doing. From orbit, they scanned the next habitable world, a planet rich with oxygen and sprawling continents, a paradise that could have nurtured generations. Sensors detected life, cities, even signs of emerging technology. Yet the orders were clear: eliminate any threat, ensure total control. Humanity's warship didn't negotiate, it didn't consider morality, it acted. As the countdown to deployment began, the tension in the command room was palpable. The crew had seen worlds fall before, but this one felt different. There was a beauty here that reminded them painfully of what they had sacrificed to reach this point. Even as the warship's weapons powered up, a faint anomaly appeared on the scanners. Something unexpected. Something moving, intelligent, and fast. It wasn't supposed to be there. Humanity's greatest weapon, the ship that turned thriving worlds into dead zones, suddenly faced a variable it hadn't anticipated. A flicker of uncertainty passed through the crew's eyes, but there was no time to ponder it. The mission demanded action. As the planet's surface came into focus, glowing cities sparkling like jewels under the atmosphere, the crew braced themselves. The human element, the ambition, the fear, the relentless drive for survival and supremacy, was now facing the unknown. Would this world fall like the others, stripped bare and lifeless? Or was this anomaly the beginning of a challenge even the most powerful human warship couldn't overcome? And then, as the first strike indicators lit up, the anomaly moved closer, revealing something the crew had never seen before. A pulse of energy, almost alive, flickered across the planet's surface. It was a warning. Or maybe a challenge. The warship hesitated for a fraction of a second, a fraction that could change everything. The countdown continued. The fate of the planet hung in the balance. Humanity's warship was ready to destroy without mercy, but the universe had a surprise in store, and no one on board knew if survival was still possible. The pulse of energy on the planet's surface grew stronger, shifting and coiling like a living entity. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. For years, they had been trained to expect the predictable: resistance, retreat, or surrender. But this was something entirely different. No sensor readings, no reconnaissance drones had ever picked up anything like it. It was as if the planet itself was alive in a way humanity had never anticipated. Inside the command room, a quiet tension settled. Officers whispered about previous campaigns, about worlds where they had swept through cities without a single hesitation, leaving nothing but silence in their wake. They had grown used to the power, the certainty of their mission. But this pulse, glowing and shifting, seemed to reject that certainty. One of the crew, normally calm and methodical, pressed a hand against the console, staring at the energy readings. "This isn't natural," they muttered. The words hung in the air, heavier than the metal hull of the ship itself. Humanity's warship had been designed to dominate. Its weapons could vaporize continents, its shields could withstand the largest planetary storms, and its targeting systems were precise enough to hit a single building from orbit. Yet for the first time, the crew felt a creeping uncertainty. This wasn't just about firepower or strategy, it was about the unknown, something no human had prepared for. The crew had always believed that if they had the ship, the weapons, and the will, no world could withstand them. But the pulse challenged that belief, as though the planet itself was fighting back. Outside the warship, the planet's surface shimmered. Forests and rivers, once calm and serene, now seemed to hum with a strange resonance, almost like a heartbeat. Cities that should have been vulnerable looked fortified by something unseen. The anomaly didn't attack, but it didn't retreat either. It simply existed, defying expectation. The crew could feel the weight of history pressing down on them. Every world they had destroyed had left a scar on humanity's conscience, but they had always told themselves it was for survival. This time, that story didn't feel enough. The captain, normally a figure of unshakable authority, leaned over the holographic display, tracing the pulse's movement across the planet. There was a pattern, subtle but undeniable, almost like a language. The realization sent a ripple through the room. If this anomaly could communicate, could strategize, then humanity might not be the only intelligent force in this sector of the galaxy. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time, the crew questioned not only the mission, but the entire framework that had justified turning habitable worlds into dead zones. Deep in the ship, engineers and scientists whispered about theories, about energy fields, biological intelligence, and unknown planetary defenses. They didn't have answers, only questions, and each one seemed more dangerous than the last. Humanity's warship had never encountered a situation where hesitation was not an option, yet now, hesitation was exactly what they were forced to confront. The planet's pulse flared suddenly, brighter and wider than before. Alarms blinked across the command deck, not because of a direct threat, but because the ship's sensors were struggling to interpret the anomaly. Something was shifting beneath the surface, something alive and intelligent. The crew realized that for the first time they were not in control, and then just as the first strike was about to be launched, the energy pulse split, revealing a form that the sensors could barely comprehend. It was enormous, almost monumental, yet impossibly fluid, moving with a grace that defied physics. The crew froze, understanding in that instant that whatever this was, it could change everything. Humanity's warship had never faced a challenge like this. The pulse pulsed again, brighter than ever, and the ship trembled, not from impact, but from something deeper, a recognition that the rules of engagement had shifted. The countdown for destruction continued, but now, every second felt like it carried the weight of an unknown future, one the crew could not predict and might not survive. The warship shuddered as the pulse on the planet's surface intensified, like a ripple spreading through reality itself. From the bridge, the crew watched the anomaly's movements, trying to predict its next action. But it was impossible. It didn't follow patterns that sensors or human minds could understand. Every calculation they made seemed inadequate, every strategy tentative. For the first time, they felt vulnerable, not physically, but in a way that struck at the core of humanity's belief in its own supremacy. Below deck, the engineers argued in low voices. Some insisted the anomaly was a natural phenomenon, some kind of electromagnetic storm amplified by the planet's unique atmosphere. Others whispered darker possibilities, that this pulse was sentient, capable of learning and responding. The ship had been built to destroy, not to negotiate, not to adapt to something it couldn't control. Yet every passing moment confirmed that this was no ordinary target. The humans on board were staring into the unknown, and the unknown was staring back. Meanwhile, outside the warship, the planet began to shift in ways that were impossible to ignore. Mountains trembled as if alive, oceans shimmered with unnatural colors, and cities that had once seemed like simple colonies now appeared to pulse with energy. Satellites and orbital scans revealed structures that defied engineering principles, buildings and networks that seemed to integrate with the very terrain. The crew could sense that the planet itself was a participant, not a passive environment. The stakes were higher than any they had faced before. Tensions rose among the crew. Some officers pushed for immediate action, arguing that hesitation was a weakness humanity could not afford. Others, haunted by glimpses of life and intelligence on the planet, questioned the morality of their orders. "We've never faced anything like this," one whispered, gripping the railing. What if this isn't just a planet? What if it's something else? The fear was palpable, not just of failure, but of the unknown consequences of their choices. Elsewhere in the ship, the science team was working frantically to interpret the anomaly. Every instrument seemed to contradict the last. They detected faint electromagnetic signals, subtle energy fluctuations, and patterns that resembled communication. But, no matter how hard they analyzed, the meaning remained just out of reach. It was a puzzle that refused to be solved, and the clock was ticking. Humanity's warship, built to erase worlds without mercy, was now facing a challenge that required thought, intuition, and patience, qualities it was not designed to rely on. On the bridge, the captain stared at the holographic display, sweat forming along the temples despite the climate-controlled room. The pulse had split into multiple strands now, wrapping around the planet in a lattice of energy. The crew realized the anomaly was not attacking, not yet. It was preparing, observing, and adapting. Every second of delay made the planet more formidable, yet striking too soon could provoke an unpredictable response. The tension was unbearable. And then, subtle movement caught their attention, something emerging from the planet's surface. Shadows, enormous and alien, shifted with the pulse, moving in ways that defied gravity and logic. The crew held their breath. These forms weren't human, weren't machines. They were something else entirely, something alive, intelligent, and aware of the warship above them. The implications were staggering. Humanity's power, absolute and unquestioned for decades, was now facing a force it could not fully comprehend. The warship trembled again, this time not from any visible impact, but from the sense of an impending confrontation. Every officer, every crew member, understood that the balance had shifted. This was no longer a mission of simple destruction. It was a test of survival, ingenuity, and perhaps even understanding. Humanity's warship had never faced a scenario like this, and whatever lay ahead promised to challenge not just their firepower, but the very essence of what it meant to be human in a galaxy that refused to bend to their will. The warship's engines hummed, a low vibration that ran through the decks as the crew tried to make sense of what was unfolding below. Every system flickered with the strain of scanning the anomaly, but the more they probed, the less they understood. The pulse continued to spread, wrapping the planet in a web of glowing energy that seemed to hum with intention. It was as if the planet itself was alive, and it knew the warship was there. On the bridge, the captain's hands hovered over the controls, not pressing any buttons, not giving any orders. The crew sensed the hesitation, a rare crack in the usual command certainty, and it spread like wildfire. Engineers, soldiers, and scientists alike watched the planet's surface with a mix of fear and awe. The city lights, which should have signaled vulnerability, now flickered as if reacting to the ship's presence. It was almost playful, almost intelligent. Humanity's greatest weapon, designed to annihilate without mercy, faced a living challenge that refused to be ignored or destroyed. Below deck, the science team was frantic. Screens displayed streams of data too complex for immediate comprehension. Electromagnetic fluctuations, quantum anomalies, energy pulses, all seemed connected, but the pattern was indecipherable. One of the scientists, normally reserved, slammed a fist onto the console. "It's learning! Every time we analyze, it adapts. It's not just alive. It's aware." The words echoed through the deck, turning fear into a tangible force. Outside, the anomaly began to change visibly. The glowing strands on the planet's surface twisted into shapes that resembled towers, and spires, structures that seemed to reach toward the warship itself. Shadows shifted across the terrain, enormous figures moving with impossible speed and coordination. The crew could feel the magnitude of what they faced. This was not just a planet. It was a fortress, a living entity, and a predator all at once. In the command room, whispers of doubt had grown into heated debate. Some argued for a preemptive strike, insisting humanity could not show hesitation in front of any potential threat. Others cautioned restraint, pointing out that one wrong move could destroy not just the planet, but the warship and everyone on it. Every officer knew the stakes had changed. This mission was no longer about dominance. It was about survival, strategy, and understanding forces beyond human control. The warship's sensors flared as the anomaly pulsed violently, sending energy spikes toward orbit. The shields absorbed some, but the readings suggested it was probing, testing, almost communicating in bursts of raw power. Crew members exchanged alarmed glances. This was no longer a planet that could be leveled with brute force. Humanity's warship had never been challenged in this way, and the crew could feel the pressure mounting, every heartbeat echoing in the metal corridors like a drum of warning. The captain's voice cut through the tension, steady but low. "We need to prepare for engagement. Brace for anything." But even as the order left their lips, the crew knew this wasn't a conventional battle. The pulse continued to flare. The shadows grew larger, and the planet itself seemed to breathe in anticipation. Every system on the warship strained, every sensor screamed of impending danger, and the crew understood one terrifying truth. Whatever was coming, it was approaching fast, and there would be no second chance. From orbit, the first strands of energy descended, reaching toward the warship like fingers probing the hull. The crew held their positions, unable to move, unable to act, watching as the anomaly tested them, waiting for the right moment to strike. The countdown to confrontation had begun, and the tension was unbearable. Humanity's warship, the pinnacle of human engineering and power, was about to face a force that defied all expectations, something alive, intelligent, and far beyond anything they had prepared for. And in that silence, just before the first collision of power and purpose, every member of the crew felt it. The moment of reckoning was nearly here. The warship trembled as the first tendrils of the planet's energy pulse grazed the hull, sending sparks across the console panels. The crew braced themselves, expecting damage, but nothing visible appeared. The anomaly wasn't attacking in the way they understood. It was testing, probing, learning. Then the sensors went haywire. Data flooded in faster than anyone could process. The planet's pulse was not only reacting to the warship, it was anticipating it. On the bridge, alarms screamed as the displays flashed warnings of massive energy surges originating from beneath the planet's surface. The captain leaned over the console, eyes narrowing at the readings. "This isn't just energy. It's organized, intelligent energy," they muttered. The crew exchanged looks of disbelief. Humanity's warship had faced orbital bombardments, asteroid strikes, and hostile fleets, but nothing like this. This was a force that seemed to think, to plan, to adapt. The pulse flared again, brighter and faster than before. But this time, something new appeared. Tiny flashes scattered across the planet, like signals being sent, coordinated, deliberate. The science officer's voice shook as they spoke. "It's calling something. It's communicating. There's more coming. Something big." The crew's stomachs sank. They had assumed the planet itself was the challenge, but now it seemed to be summoning reinforcements or awakening something buried deep beneath the surface. Suddenly, the warship's comms erupted with static and distortion. Strange shapes appeared on every visual feed, silhouettes of massive unknown forms rising from oceans, forests, and cities alike. They moved in unnatural ways, their movements fluid yet coordinated. The crew froze, realizing the anomaly was not a single entity. It was an entire ecosystem of intelligence, rising in response to the warship's presence. Humanity's greatest weapon, the ship designed to turn habitable worlds into dead zones, now faced an enemy that could multiply, adapt, and strike unpredictably. The captain issued orders to engage defensive systems, but the anomaly reacted almost instantaneously. Energy tendrils wrapped around the warship's shields, testing them, probing weaknesses. The hull shuddered under the pressure, and for the first time, the crew felt true fear. The pulse was no longer just a threat. It was a living, breathing opponent, one that seemed to know every move before it happened. Below deck, the engineers scrambled to reroute power, their hands flying over controls as new alarms screamed of failures across multiple systems. The science team analyzed the new readings, only to discover something even more shocking. The anomaly's energy signatures were partially human-made. Somewhere in the depths of the planet, or perhaps hidden in its history, there were remnants of technology that mirrored their own. The crew realized, with a growing sense of horror, that the planet had been prepared for this warship long before it ever arrived. The tension on the bridge was unbearable. Officers whispered theories. Was this a trap set by another human faction? Or had some ancient civilization built a defense system capable of rivaling humanity's greatest warship? The pulse surged again, spreading across the planet like a wave of light and force. The shadows of the massive forms stretched toward the ship, moving with intent. The captain's voice cut through the chaos, steady but urgent. All hands, brace for impact. This is no ordinary mission. Every decision we make now could decide if we survive. Outside, the planet's surface pulsed violently, energy flaring across continents, and the massive forms moved closer, faster than any human thought possible. Humanity's warship, built to destroy without mercy, was facing a living, intelligent, and potentially premeditated response. And in that moment, the crew understood a terrifying truth. This was not just a battle for the planet. It was a test of everything humanity thought it knew about power, strategy, and survival. The warship's hull shuddered violently as the pulse from the planet wrapped around it like living fingers, testing every shield and system at once. Sparks flew along the console edges, alarms screamed, and the crew gritted their teeth, bracing for impact. For a long, tense moment, nothing happened. Then the planet's energy surged upward in a blinding flash. The warship rocked, thrown off balance, systems failing in waves. The crew scrambled to stabilize the ship, fighting against power fluctuations and failing communications. Humanity's warship, the apex of human engineering, was being forced to survive by sheer grit and instinct rather than firepower. On the bridge, the captain's voice was calm but fierce. Divert all power to the shields. Focus on maintaining orbit. Do not engage unless necessary. Every officer knew the stakes. A single misstep, and the ship, and everyone aboard, would be lost. The pulse grew more structured, almost like a rhythm, wrapping the planet in waves of energy that the crew realized weren't meant to destroy. They were meant to communicate. Slowly, painstakingly, the science officer began deciphering the pattern. Each pulse contained signals resembling mathematical sequences, hints of intelligence far beyond what they had ever encountered. Then the massive forms, rising from the planet's surface, seemed to respond to these sequences. Shadows moved in harmony with the pulse, energy flaring in synchronization with the warship's shields. The crew held their breath as a startling realization hit. The anomaly wasn't attacking to kill, it was testing. It was assessing whether the humans were capable of understanding, of adapting, of respecting the life and intelligence it contained. The planet itself, along with its guardians, was a sentient system designed to survive and communicate. The captain took a deep breath and gave a single order. Attempt contact. We're not here to conquer. This is our message. The crew hesitated but followed. Energy converters were recalibrated, and the warship's communication systems were pushed to their limits, broadcasting signals that mirrored the planet's patterns. The pulse responded almost immediately. Flashes of light cascaded across continents, massive forms shifting to create a living lattice of energy, and for the first time, the warship's sensors detected what could only be called acknowledgement. The planet had understood. The tension in the command deck eased fractionally, replaced by awe. Humanity's warship, the vessel that had erased worlds without hesitation, had faced a force it could not destroy, and survived not by force, but by understanding. The pulse receded, the massive forms returned to the surface, and the glowing lattice dimmed, leaving the planet alive, intact, and aware. Relief washed over the crew, but it was tempered by a creeping sense of unease. They had glimpsed something far greater than themselves. Just as the crew began to breathe, the unexpected happened. From deep beneath the planet, a singular, enormous energy pulse shot directly at the warship, not as an attack, but as a delivery. The warship's sensors interpreted it as a data stream, something ancient, alien, yet familiar. Images and memories flowed through the ship's systems, the planet's history, civilizations long extinct, technologies forgotten, and warnings of other sentient worlds that could rise if humans repeated their pattern of destruction. The captain stared at the display, realizing the magnitude. Humanity had not only survived, they had been entrusted with knowledge, with a choice, to continue as conquerors or to become the stewards of a galaxy far more complex than they had imagined. The warship hovered above the planet, silent now, the pulse gone, but the memory of it etched into every system, every mind aboard. And in the quiet that followed, as the crew processed the revelation, another signal flickered faintly on the sensors, far beyond the planet, in the dark reaches of space. Something else was watching, waiting, and aware. Humanity's warship was no longer the hunter. It was part of a much larger game. The warship floated in orbit above the planet, its engines humming softly as the tension slowly drained from the crew. The pulse that had threatened to destroy them was gone, leaving behind a planet alive and strangely calm. The massive forms that had risen from forests and oceans had returned to the surface, dormant yet unmistakably aware. The crew stared at the planet below, awe mixing with a quiet sense of respect. For the first time in generations, humanity's warship had faced a world it could not conquer and lived to learn from it. In the command room, officers moved cautiously, still processing the data the planet had transmitted. Memories of ancient civilizations, technologies lost to time, and warnings of other intelligent worlds now filled the ship's systems. The science officer spoke softly, almost to themselves. This planet, it survived because it adapted. It taught us. It didn't just defend itself. It shared knowledge. The realization settled over the crew like a weight lifted. Humanity's power, no matter how advanced, was not absolute. Respect, understanding, and communication could be stronger than weapons. The captain leaned back, eyes fixed on the glowing continents below. The mission had started with destruction as its goal, habitable worlds reduced to dead zones, but now it ended with reflection. "We came here thinking we were the unstoppable force," they said, voice steady. "But the galaxy isn't ours to claim. We have to learn, adapt, survive, not by erasing others, but by understanding them." The crew nodded in quiet agreement, the lessons of the planet etched deep into their minds. As the ship prepared to leave orbit, the sensors picked up the faint signal that had appeared during the climax, far beyond the planet, a distant watcher, unseen yet aware. The captain considered it carefully. Humanity's warship was powerful, yes, but it was now part of a universe filled with forces far more complex than human ambition alone. Every choice mattered. Every act of destruction or mercy rippled across countless worlds. The galaxy was alive, and humans were only one part of it. The engineers finally stabilized the ship's systems, repairing damage caused by the pulse. The communication team archived the data from the planet, preserving its history and knowledge for humanity to study. Crew members wandered the decks, exhausted but thoughtful, some staring out at the stars with a sense of wonder they hadn't felt since leaving Earth. They had faced the unknown, survived, and returned with something far more valuable than victory: perspective. As the warship jumped to hyperspace, the planet slowly receded from view, glowing with life and intelligence that humanity could no longer ignore. The pulse had left a lasting impression, a reminder that even the most advanced human technology could meet forces beyond comprehension. And though the distant signal hinted at challenges still to come, the crew understood that fear did not have to dictate their actions. Strength, strategy, and compassion could shape the future in ways brute force never could. The journey continued, but the mission had changed the humans aboard in ways permanent and profound. Humanity's warship, once a symbol of destruction and dominance, had become a vessel of learning and responsibility. The stars stretched out ahead, vast and infinite, but now the crew faced them with humility and awareness. The galaxy was not theirs to conquer, but theirs to explore, to understand, and perhaps to protect. And as the warship disappeared into the dark expanse of space, the crew knew this was only the beginning. Humanity had survived, learned, and adapted, and the universe, alive and full of mysteries, waited for them.